Karet. Gimana?
Tahukah Anda, bumi kita menampung 320.000 spesies flora, 7,7 juta spesies fauna, dan 7,8 miliar manusia. Tahukah Anda, setiap tahunnya manusia memproduksi 3,5 ton plastik dan sebanyak 1,2 miliar kemasan plastik kosmetik ditemukan di dalamnya. Tahukah Anda, selain plastik kosmetik, kandungan dalam kosmetik yang sehari-hari kita gunakan juga menyumbang polusi untuk bumi. Tahukah Anda, limbah kandungan kosmetik ikut mengalir ke laut bersama air ketika kita mandi? Tahukah Anda, kosmetik yang kita aplikasikan ke kulit merusak ekosistem saat kita bermain di laut?
Alright.
Tahukah Anda, jika setiap orang mengurangi 1 sampah kosmetik setiap bulannya dan beralih ke perawatan tubuh yang ramah lingkungan, maka bumi akan kembali lestari. Kita hanya butuh 1 langkah untuk bisa mewujudkannya. Tahukah Anda, bumi kita menampung 320.000 spesies flora, 7,7 juta spesies fauna, dan 7,8 miliar manusia. Tahukah Anda, setiap tahunnya manusia memproduksi 3,5 ton plastik dan sebanyak 1,2 miliar kemasan plastik kosmetik ditemukan di dalamnya. Tahukah Anda, selain plastik kosmetik, kandungan dalam kosmetik yang sehari-hari kita gunakan juga menyumbang polusi untuk bumi. Tahukah Anda, limbah kandungan kosmetik ikut mengalir ke laut bersama air ketika kita mandi? Tahukah Anda, kosmetik yang kita aplikasikan ke kulit merusak ekosistem saat kita bermain di laut? Tahukah Anda, jika setiap orang mengurangi 1 sampah kosmetik setiap bulannya dan beralih ke perawatan tubuh yang ramah lingkungan, maka bumi akan kembali lestari. Kita hanya butuh 1 langkah untuk bisa mewujudkannya. Tahukah Anda, bumi kita menampung 320.000 spesies flora, 7,7 juta spesies fauna, dan 7,8 miliar manusia. Tahukah Anda, setiap tahunnya manusia memproduksi 3,5 ton plastik dan sebanyak 1,2 miliar kemasan plastik kosmetik ditemukan di dalamnya. Tahukah Anda, selain plastik kosmetik, kandungan dalam kosmetik yang sehari-hari kita gunakan juga menyumbang polusi untuk bumi. Tahukah Anda, limbah kandungan kosmetik ikut mengalir ke laut bersama air ketika kita mandi? Tahukah Anda, kosmetik yang kita aplikasikan ke kulit merusak ekosistem saat kita bermain di laut? Tahukah Anda, jika setiap orang mengurangi 1 sampah kosmetik setiap bulannya dan beralih ke perawatan tubuh yang ramah lingkungan, maka bumi akan kembali lestari. Kita hanya butuh 1 langkah untuk bisa mewujudkannya.
Hello, good morning and good afternoon in Bali. Thank you for everyone for finding the time and joining our webinar series by AquaMarine Diving with the topic Marine Megafauna, Manta and Mola. Let me introduce myself. My name is Bram, the host of the webinar today. And actually, I want to tell a little bit about this AWARE webinar series. So this webinar series is part of the AWARE Week 2021 by AquaMarine Diving Bali. It's held from 18 to 26 last week. And then last week we have these webinars on blue carbon, and then one day before that we did beach cleanup and underwater cleanup. So AWARE Week 2021 by AquaMarine Diving is beach cleanup, dive again debris, and webinars. Also in the end we will have AquaMarine Diving Bali goes to school. So I'd like to say thanks to AquaMarine Diving Bali, PADI, ULO, Marine Megafauna Foundation, Ocean Sunfish Research Trust for supporting this webinar and our media partners. Also Oceanographic Forum Penyelam Mahasiswa Indonesia, Kelompok Studi Kelautan Biogama, and Unit Selam UGM. And I would like to remind the participant about the standard rule of the webinar. These participants should change their name using the format name underscore organization or agency. Second, participants are expected to use a virtual background that have been shared. And then the speaking function is disabled during the presentation. The participant actually could ask question by writing in the chat box during the presentation and ask orally when the speaking function is unmute on Q&A session. And the first and second best question will be awarded. And then the last thing is the participants should enable the camera or on cam during the photo session. After now, I would like to introduce our moderator of the webinar. Please say hello everyone to Wanda. She was AquaMarine Diving Bali intern last year. And let me this one. So Wanda is joining Udayana Hiking Club and currently in progress working on her undergraduate thesis. Meantime, she is a dive master at dive operator in Bali. Regarding this webinar, Wanda did MANTA research in NUSA PENIDA for school paper submission. Well, how are you, Wanda?
I am good.
All good?
All good.
Yes, sure you are. What have you been up to today?
Not that much. Not very much.
Okay. By the way, I feel sorry for you that you couldn't join the beach cleanup and underwater cleanup last week. Yeah, last minute canceled. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll join you next time.
Yeah, you could actually. Every month at 4th, we have this beach cleanup and underwater cleanup. And then anyway, let's not waste any time. Please, Wanda, time and the screen is yours.
Okay. So, hello everyone. And thank you, Bram, for having me as a moderator. Thank you, Bram, for having me as a moderator. And then for today, I will be your moderator for Megafauna, especially about, we're gonna discuss about Mola-Mola and Manta. So we have two we have two speakers, and I will introduce you later. But I would like to say thank you guys for joining us here. And then for the first, I will tell you about the agenda. So the agenda. First, I will introduce the speaker, and the first speaker will tell about Manta, and then the next speaker will tell about her publication about ocean sunfish. In the end of the session, we will have a Q&A. So you guys, if you have curious about Manta and Mola related about Megafauna, please do not hesitate to type it on the comment box, because we AquaMarine Diving Bali, we prepare a merchandise for the best question. So yeah, I underline the information. Please type the question on the comment box. Okay, to make it efficient, let me introduce the first speaker. I can't hear anything, though. Sorry, I can't hear anything. I can't hear my own voice. No, I can't hear. I'm so sorry. Please wait for a minute. I'm so sorry, guys, for the technical. Okay, so first we will have our first speaker, Janice Ageswara. Please give a wave to Janice. Hi, Janice. How are you?
Hi, Warda.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, I can hear you. Okay, so guys, Janice is a project leader from Marine Megafauna, and I'm curious about Janice because she's so young and she's a project leader of Marine Megafauna. So yeah, please have a wave with Janice. Hi, Janice. And then I'm actually curious about what a typical day as a project leader at Marine Megafauna. Could you tell us?
A typical day, before the pandemic, we would go on a lot of dives. We could go about twice to 3 times a week before the pandemic to go to manta sites. But since the pandemic, we rarely go out. Usually it's just once a week, or sometimes it's like twice a week, and then it's very quiet the next week, and most of it it's just a lot of laptop work, data analysis and stuff.
Oh, cool. Yeah, okay, so maybe you guys are excited about the Janice publication, but I have if you Janice talk about megafauna, I have having a high interest with megafauna, and while I am having a class several months ago, we have a class about marine megafauna, and it blew me away, and I just wanted to be like you, discover a megafauna like that. So what makes you interested with megafauna?
I've always been interested in animals since I was a young kid. I used to be really interested in orangutans. And then I learned about the marine life, and then I switched from the land-based ecosystem to the ocean-based, and I just my love for animals just keeps on growing. So I'm really lucky to be able to work at MMF because I work with the things that I love.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so that's what Jadi say about marine megafauna. So to not make it to waste time, let's have Janice to present her publication. So time is yours, Janice.
Look, I'm gonna stop your screen share, yeah?
Yeah.
Wait, sorry. Can you see the presentation?
Yeah, it's clear.
Yeah, perfect.
Full screen, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I live in Bali, so good afternoon, selamat sore for people in Bali, and hi to everyone else. My name is Janice, as Warda have introduced me. So today I'm going to talk a bit about mantas. There are still so many things that we don't know about manta rays, but this is some of the things that I think would introduce you guys to what a manta ray basically is and why we should protect them. But before I go into the topic, I'm going to introduce a bit about Marine Megafauna Foundation. So the MMF started with Dr. Andrea Marshall and Dr. Simon Pierce, who co-founded MMF in Mozambique. And after Mozambique, they spread out their chapters around the globe. So we have MMF Americas, MMF Mozambique, and MMF Southeast Asia, with the headquarters here in Nusa Lembongan, Indonesia. At Nusa Lembongan, we have Elitsa, Ellie, our team leader. And then Ellie is the one right in the middle of the screen. And then move to the right, that's me. And two pictures below me is our current interns. We have Maul and Aulia. And so that is, and we have Helen, one of the people here at MMF as well. And so we are a small team. And speaking of interns, they are going to finish their internship period next week. So if anybody's interested, they're going to have an internship experience presentation next week, which you guys can sign up if any of you guys are interested. If you're wondering what it's like to do an internship at a marine-based NGO and see what a day-to-day NGO day looks like according to these two interns. So yeah, if you guys want to sign up, the link is there. Okay, moving on now to the actual talk. I'm going to talk about these called gentle giants. So manta rays and whale sharks, they're both called gentle giants for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because they're called giants because they are massive. They are huge, just way too big to explain. Whale sharks, they are the biggest fish globally, fish to ever be found. And manta rays, they're the biggest rays in our ocean, so that's why they're called giants. And both manta rays and sharks, the whale sharks, they are not violent. They're very harmless. They don't have large, sharp teeth, but they have these little microscopic teeth. That's why they're called gentle giants. But on this talk, I'm going to focus on manta rays only. Now, these are some numbers that MMF has collected throughout Indonesia, but obviously we have several areas that we have not accessed yet. For example, in Rote or in Kepulauan Riau, where people say there are mantas, but we haven't had a chance to go there yet. So for now, we have some numbers of manta rays in Indonesia, including in Nusa Lembongan. We have almost 800 individuals identified. In Komodo, we have 1,242. In Raja Ampat, we have 2 species manta rays. We have the giant oceanic manta up to 269, and the reef manta ray up to 650. And our most recent research location is in Sangalaki, or in East Kalimantan. We have identified 155 individuals for now. And in total, we actually have about 3,100 mantas that we have identified for now. Hopefully the numbers will keep growing. Now, manta rays, they are cousins with sharks. So sharks and rays, they're cousins. They're called elasmobranchs, where elasmobranchs mean they are fish with, they don't have bones. So they are cartilage animals, meaning they don't have proper bones like we do, but they have cartilage out of, their body is made out of cartilage like our nose and our ears. So when they die, this is what they look like, their cartilage, and it breaks down pretty easily. So for fossil records, it's usually using their microscopic teeth because you can't really take away their bones or their cartilage for fossil records. Now, they are again called gentle giants because, like I say, they don't have any like proper big teeth. So what they do is that they filter the water, and these animals are called filter feeders. So filter feeders are animals that filter the water, where the water has plankton in it, like an abundance of plankton. And then they have this, manta rays have these things called gill rakers, where the gills trap the plankton and filter out the rest of the water out their body. So these gill rakers capture their food and then they digest their food. So manta rays, they can filter up to 90 meters of cube water every hour. And I can't imagine how much 90 meters cube of water is. So to visualize it, this is a picture of 1 ton of water, like several gallons. And then you times 90, and that is how much they filter every hour. So even though manta rays are huge, huge animals, they're massive, and they feed on the tiniest animals in the ocean, but they feed a lot of it. So that's why they were able to fulfill their needs. Now, just for filtering these plankton, mantas are actually pretty cool because they have several strategies to filter these animals. So I'm going to show you a bit some of them. So this is called the surface or mid-water behavior, where they filter the water, and then they get all the plankton inside their mouth. So this is where they feed on the surface of the water or in mid-water. So that's one. Then we have this barrel rolling, which is kind of one of my favorite. So how they do it is that these mantas, they do a little somersault, roll belakang, back roll. Because manta rays, they cannot swim backwards. And so by doing somersaults, it's one way for them to save their energy and just to keep feeding on the same dense area, so they don't have to go back and forth. So that is one of the strategies. And usually we see smaller manta rays or younger manta rays doing this because it does take some quite of energy to do that, to turn around. And then we have bottom feeding. So bottom feeding is when sometimes planktons, they drown, they fall to the ground, to the bottom of the ocean. And sometimes manta rays want to eat the fallen planktons, you can say. So they would scoop out the plankton from the bottom. And how do we know that they do this? Is because we can actually see some scarring, some rash underneath the manta ray's mouth. So that's how we know that they do feed on the ground. And lastly, it's called the mass feeding aggregations, where many mantas, they all come together. And then in the very productive, very abundant of plankton area, they would create like this whirlpool, like a tornado thing. And it will collect all the plankton in that area, and the mantas will swim through the area to feed on the plankton. Now, I've never seen this before, but the most popular place to find these mass feeding aggregations is in the Maldives, where the productivity of the water is really, really good. That's why they have it there. Now, with these different strategies, and then we kind of think, so mantas only feed by filtering plankton, filtering water, but why do they need all of these strategies? Like why not just swim through it? And then, so with them making these strategies, and then we think, are mantas actually smart? Like, you know, we know dolphins are smart, but are mantas actually smart? The answer to that is yes, they are. So manta rays have the biggest brain to body ratio of any fish. So that kind of shows how smart they are. If you have dived with or snorkel with manta rays, you will know how curious manta rays are. Sometimes I would just wave to the manta and tell them I mean no harm. So mantas might come up to you and see what you are, what they're swimming with. And so with this big brain, of course, they can be curious and they can make feeding strategies. And with this brain as well, they also have what we call social interactions. Social interactions including they have little groups of their own, and as well as reproductive goals, such as meeting their partners, looking for partners. So that that's including in social interactions. And if any scientists out there or someone who's just a bit nerdy like I am wants to read about social interactions, you can screenshot this. Is a paper from one of our colleagues, Rob, who did a PhD thesis on social interactions on manta rays in Raja Ampat. Okay, now talking about reproductive ecology, I'm going to talk more about that, is that we need to know how to differentiate mantas between males and females, especially when we're diving. And if I'm doing my research, I would have to know that, okay, that is a female manta, that's a male manta. And how do we differentiate is quite easy, actually. So again, manta rays raise their cousins with sharks. So all sharks and rays have these two, if they're males, they have these two sticks called claspers. And so when they're young, these claspers are right like on their tail. But when they're adult males, the clasper extends their fin so that you can see the claspers are bigger in the adult male picture. You can differentiate between the juvenile males and the adult males. However, for females, their sex organs are internal, so you can't really see whether she's an adult or a juvenile based on her sex organ. But if the females have what we call reproductive scars, well, reproductive scars are the scars that females have after mating. So when they mate, the males would bite on the female's left wing. And so that left wing will have a mark that she has been bitten by the male and that she has been, she mates with the male. And so if we see these wing scars, usually on their left side of their wing, that means we know that she is an adult because she did some mating activities. Other than mating scars, if she is pregnant, we can tell that she's also an adult because she's pregnant. But sometimes when the pregnancy is still very early, it's really hard to differentiate between female mantas and pregnant mantas. But when it's like really, really big, like the one on the bottom right, you can actually see the manta is just like really, really big. That's how we know how we differentiate female mantas as adults as well. And so without the female mantas having wing scars or pregnancy or pregnant, we don't know how to classify the females into adults. Like obviously there are adult females that don't have reproductive scars or pregnant, but without visual organs to see, it's really hard. So that's why I'm currently doing a research project where I am focusing on measuring the manta rays. So I have this still laser instrument setup where with the setup, I will measure the manta rays from above with lasers, and I will see, then I will put it on the computer and see how big the manta rays are. And with measurement sizes, I can actually classify the manta rays according to their measurements. So even if there are female manta rays who aren't pregnant, who doesn't have wing scars, but the size class, the measurements is more than 3.5 meters, for example, I can classify her into adult, even though she is not pregnant or doesn't have any wing scars. So that's kind of one thing that I'm doing. And the other is to confirm MANTA Bay as a nursery ground, which I will talk about later on. Now this is what a baby manta looks like. So when baby mantas are in the belly, they have their wings above, fold up like that. And the mama mantas, they are pregnant for 12 months, so 1 year. They keep the baby in for 1 year. And why do they keep it for 1 year? It's because there are no any parental guidance after the baby is born. So unlike whales, where the mom and the baby sticks together for a period of time, manta rays don't do that. So after the baby is born, they just go on their separate ways. So that's why the baby has to be quite big to protect themselves to survive in the wild. And so the smallest baby manta is at least 1.5 meters from wingtip to wingtip. So that's actually already really, really big for a baby. So since their pregnancy takes up to 12 months, that means they have a very slow reproductive rate. And in addition, other than they have like a really slow pregnancy rate, but they also grow very, very slow. So the first year of a baby manta is called a yearling. And after a year, they will turn to juveniles. And they will be classified as adults after 8 to 10 years, where they are mature enough to reproduce. And manta rays are known to have lived over 40 years, so that is actually pretty cool. But yeah, since these mantas, they are pregnant for 1 year, one mama manta can only produce 1 to 2 baby mantas every 2 to 5 years. So that is not a lot of babies produced from one mom. Sometimes we do see a mama manta that is pregnant like back to back. So if last year she was pregnant and then this year she's pregnant again, we do see that sometimes, but not all the time. So obviously, if you can imagine, carrying a baby that big, 1.5 meters in their belly for 12 months takes a lot of energy. And so that's why these mama mantas, they don't always get pregnant every year. And again, they need a really good supply of food to feed themselves and the baby. Now, since they have a very slow reproductive productivity and they grow up very slow and they don't have a fast population recovery, that is why the mobile alfredi or the reef manta ray is classified, is set as vulnerable to extinction by the IUCN Red List. So yeah, again, because of they don't reproduce much, you know, they grow up very late. That's why they're now classified as vulnerable to extinction, and we need all the efforts to protect them. So one of the efforts that MMF is doing is we take pictures. So like humans, we have our fingerprints. Manta rays have what we call belly prints, where belly prints are basically prints under the underside of the manta rays, where each manta ray has different patterns. So this is what we call an ID shot. We take a picture of the manta of the belly, we can identify who that manta is. And once we take a picture of that belly, we actually know a lot of things about these mantas. Firstly, we know their identification and species. We know their sex. We know their maturity for males. For females, only if she's pregnant or have a mating scar. Size, if you have the instrument that I do, or with estimates. Disease or scarring. So with scarring, sometimes I have seen mantas with only like one proper cephalic fin. Sometimes their tails are bent. Sometimes they have shark bites, or maybe hooks on their gill rakers, on their, yeah, sometimes we see fishing hooks. So that's where we know the scarrings. We also see some behavior, whether they are cleaning, cruising, feeding, mating. So that's what we know from the picture. We know their habitat and environment conditions. And lastly, we know their movement patterns, which I will talk about after this. Now, with the pictures, after we get the pictures, we usually upload it to mantamanta.org, where it is a manta global database. So by uploading the manta pictures, manta bellies to this website, the manta will have their own profile page. So it's like Facebook, but for manta rays. They will have their own profile page, where, for example, there's this one manta called Dr. Evil. So Dr. Evil will have her own page. And in that page, you will see where she's been sighted, how many times she's been sighted, how many times she's been pregnant, and whether she has a scarring or not. So through that Facebook profile page, we can actually see her growth over the years. Now, our co-founder, Andrea, she was the first person to do a PhD on manta rays, which is pretty cool because she learned that manta rays are data deficient in IUCN back in the early 2000s. So she did her PhD on manta rays, and after looking through manta rays for years and years and years, she finally figured out that there was a specific pattern that she just realized. And that pattern was that there are 2 species of manta rays. So before, she thought there was only 1 species of manta rays, but after looking through the pictures again and again and seeing the differences, she stated that there are 2 different manta rays, which is the giant oceanic manta and the reef manta ray, where the giant oceanic mantas, as you see in the first map that I pointed out, are mostly found in Raja Ampat, while the reef manta rays or the Mobile alfredi is found in more areas. If anyone's feeling a bit nerdy, you guys can read the difference between the description of manta by Andrea. So again, like what I say, they're called giants because they are massive. Meanwhile, with our biggest ray, the giant oceanic manta can be up to 8 meters from wingtip to wingtip. So that is huge. I've never seen an oceanic manta before, but I can imagine, because the reef manta rays, they're pretty big. Like they can be up to like 4.5 meters, the females. And I can't imagine how big the oceanic manta ray is. So hopefully I'll be able to see them one day, but yeah, I just can't imagine how big they are, 8 meters. Now, manta rays are pretty cool too, because manta rays have this thing called color morph, where instead of having a white body with black spots, they have a black body with white spots, which sometimes we call them ninjas. And in PENIDA, we have about 10% of the population that are classified as ninjas. And again, our colleague Steph, she did her PhD thesis on color morphs in manta rays. Yeah, so she sees the survival rate between normal colored manta rays and melanistic manta rays. Another even more rare manta rays is the leucistic manta, where they're just white with this black shadow on the top of their body. And this is even more rare than ninjas, and I haven't seen the one myself. But I think someone seen them once in Komodo. I'm not sure if it's a resident there or just passing through, but someone seen the leucistic ones in Komodo, which is pretty cool. Now, about movements. So in the left picture, he took a picture of who we now know as Dr. Evil in NUSA PENIDA. And in 2013, my team leader, Ellie, she took a picture of Dr. Evil in Komodo National Park in 2013. So if you guys can see now, the identifications are similar. It is indeed Dr. Evil. It's not different mantas. And with these 2 pictures, we know Dr. Evil goes back and forth PENIDA and Komodo. And she's been spotted 32 times in PENIDA and Komodo for the past 10 years, 11 years, which is pretty cool. So this is the map. This is how far PENIDA and Komodo is. It's about 450 kilometers apart. So that is far. That's really, really far. And so with this information that we have, Ellie and our co-founder Andrea, they made a paper regarding manta ray movements between national parks and MPAs on NUSA PENIDA and Komodo, which again, you guys can screenshot and look it up. It's open access. So this is actually really, really cool. And through this paper, my team leader, Ellie, she decided to focus a bit more on the NUSA PENIDA area, where this is also part of her PhD thesis. And with her PhD thesis, she figured out that there are two main manta aggregation sites, or dive sites where mantas are mostly seen. Firstly, we have Manta Bay, which is mostly used for feeding, and it's also a proposed nursery ground. So that Manta Bay is the area where I want to prove that it is a nursery ground. Hopefully, we get to prove it. Yeah, and the other one is Manta Point, where I think more people would be familiar of in PENIDA because it is a very popular dive site for mantas. Where in Manta Point, we see more of the cleaning and social interactions and courtship. So Manta Point is where the adults hang around, and Manta Bay is where the younger ones like to play. Yeah. So this is the paper Ellie published on the habitat use and the dynamics of the manta ray populations within PENIDA. Now, unfortunately, since manta rays do go back and forth between their aggregation sites, between where they move, are two main manta ray fishery ports in Indonesia. Back in 2012, Indonesia was in the top 3 of manta ray fisheries, unfortunately. And so that, obviously, this isn't a good thing, and this is one of the direct threats that manta rays are facing. And for indirect threats, there are a lot, some of them being big boats. And then we have propeller and hooks stuck on manta rays. And then we have mass tourism, mooring lines, where sometimes manta rays can be caught up in mooring lines and fishing nets. We have plastic pollution, of course. And another indirect one is climate change, where result in increasing of sea temperature can cause a change in their food abundance in the sea, especially planktons, right? And talking about a bit about these indirect threats, I want to talk a bit about plastic pollution. For plastic pollution, we focus on microplastics. If you guys know, microplastics are the tiny, well, plastics you can't really see with your bare eyes. You need to take a microscope with it. But Ellie, for her PhD thesis, she did a microplastic research in manta rays and in whale sharks, with her 3 sites being in Pantai Bentar in East Java, Nusa Penida, and Kebun National Park. So her results state that manta rays actually do ingest plastics, but they are able to secrete out again, and that most plastics are found during, not really surprised, but during the rainy season. If you guys want to read more about this paper, you guys can also read it here. We talk about microplastics in manta rays and whale sharks. And so for my undergraduate thesis, my skripsi, I actually followed Ellie's footsteps, where I focused on microplastics and manta rays, but I look for a gap in her research. Like, okay, she's done this. Now, what haven't she done? So I should do it. And so her PhD is from 2016 to 2018. I'm only doing my skripsi. I only focus on one year of data. And after getting more microplastics data, other than visualizing it based on its colors and size and type only, I also look into the chemical compounds, what these plastics are made of, or the polymers. So this is what I did for my undergraduate thesis, or skripsi, which eventually we got it published as a peer-reviewed journal. So if you guys want to access the paper, here you go. Okay, so with all of these threats and what we know of manta rays and everything, now we start to think, how are we supposed to help them? Like, so what I'm doing here and what we do here at FMF is we study conservation biology, where we study about the biological aspects and how we can help them. Where, like all science, basically, we see a problem, we find the solution. And so, since you remember how like manta rays move from one place to another, and it's like pretty far. So with that information of that manta rays move, and the fact that manta rays actually produce more money in manta ray tourism rather than in manta ray fisheries, the government actually did something and stated that Indonesia will protect manta rays all across the EEZ or ZAA, making Indonesia the biggest manta ray sanctuary in the world. So that is pretty cool. And so now they actually have a law for people who do manta ray fisheries. And obviously it's not perfect, but it's a start. And that we keep on trying to stop manta ray fisheries. Yeah, I'm doing that. So after that, now another thing that we can do is that we can promote manta rays and whale sharks or other animals as flagship species, as species that we can, as an iconic species, like for example, as an umbrella species is a species that if we protect that one species, we will protect other species or other habitats as well. So if we know that manta rays move from PENIDA to Komodo, and if we protect manta rays, we will be able to protect their whole habitat in a bigger scale. So that is what an umbrella species does. And a flagship species is where a species is an icon that people can relate to, and that it raises people's awareness, for example, polar bears with climate change. So that is how we can use maybe manta rays and whale sharks as an example, or as a flagship species for microplastics, for Megafauna who ingest microplastics, for example. And so by doing this talk as well and sharing these information to you guys, it's already one way to reach other people and let you guys know that these animals are in danger and that we need all the help we can get to protect them. Now, just some ending slides. If anybody has ever snorkeled or dived or swam with manta rays, your guide should be able to tell you the code of conduct of swimming with manta rays. If not, you can remind the dive guides or the guides or other people to follow these code of conduct, where when we see a manta or basically any animals in the ocean, is we want to stay at least 3 to 5 meters away from them. We want to not get too close to them because, you know, I don't like it when somebody invades my personal space. And so you should think of that too. When you want to go see an animal, keep in mind that you don't want to invade their personal space as well. And so manta rays, again, they're really smart. They have the biggest brain to body ratio, meaning that they are curious. So if they are curious, they will swim to you, and you just need to stay calm because manta rays, again, they're harmless. They just want to see who they're swimming with. And again, if you're like me, say hi, say you mean no harm. And no, for picture, photography, flash, make sure you don't flash them in their eyes. They're sensitive. And yeah, just be mindful of your environment and their cleaning stations and for other animals as well. So this is something to keep in mind, not only for manta, but all animals that we see underwater. Now, as I say again, if you guys are divers and you have some belly shots, remember to upload it to mantamatcher.org, where our team can identify the mantas for you, and you will get a notification on whether the manta you took was a new one or someone we have seen in the past several years. But we not only do we have manta ray databases, we also have for whale sharks, we have for manta rays, for whales, turtles, and leopard sharks. So these they're actually pretty cool for you to upload some stuff here. So that's it from me. I hope it's useful to everyone. If you guys want to keep in touch, these are some of our Facebook and Instagram pages, and we have a newsletter and a magazine at marinemegafauna.org. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Janice, for your presentation. It's so clear, and for me, it's increased my awareness about manta rays. And then I agree with you that manta is a smart and mysterious animal. Thank you for campaign to increase the awareness about manta rays. And I agree with you with their biting behavior. It's kind of unique. Also, I wanna ask you if there is if people want to become or join marine megafauna to become a volunteer, is there any step or how they could sign up? Janice?
Right now, since I told you in the beginning, we just finished our 2 interns. So we will actually tell people if we do have an opening of interns or volunteers, because as an NGO, I think, especially people who hear if you guys work in an NGO as well, funding is a big thing in NGOs where we need to continuously ask for fund, apply for grants. So again, we cannot just take interns and volunteers as we would like to. So we would usually just tell out when we're open and everything. But yeah, make sure you guys listen to the talk next week. I'll give you the registration link on the chat room.
Oh, okay. So that's from Janice, everyone. And I saw on comment box, there's a lot of questions for Janice, but I want to remind you guys that the question will be answered in the end of the session. So once again, thank you, Janice, for acknowledge us. I hope you keep inspiring us. And once again, thank you. Okay. Yeah, Janice. Okay, as I promised you guys before, there's another guest speaker, and I'm so excited to talk with her. So, hello, Marianne.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. Yeah.
Excellent.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh, okay. I can hear you, and I'm a little bit. Yeah, I can. It's perfect.
Perfect.
I can hear you, and I'm a little bit nervous after you. Okay. So yesterday I saw your presentation and there's a lot of data, scientific data okay. Oh, but sorry, Marian. Maybe I should introduce you first. I'm so sorry, Jen. I'm so sorry, Marian.
You're coming through a little bit. I think we have a little bit of lag, but I'll try and do my best to follow.
Yeah. Yes, Marian. So as you can see, everyone, Marian Nygaard, she's a researcher and lead scientist on Ocean Sunfish Research Trust. And then, as you can see, you can read on the screen. To make it efficient, let's have a look with Marian publication. Time is yours, Marian.
All right, are we good to go?
Yeah, cool.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for having me as well. It's always such a pleasure to be invited to speak at these events. So let's get started. So we're talking about ocean sunfish today, and we're talking at the AWARE Week. So I thought we would start out with what should we be aware of. So in this presentation, I have followed some of the questions that you guys have given me and also gone a bit off track. We will start to talk about what sunfish are, because I think they're a bit of an overlooked fish. So I love Janice's presentation. Mantas are just just really, really beautiful creatures. And they awe everybody with their size and their grace. And there's so much more to be learned about mantas. When we look towards sunfish, we have a species that's even less studied and less understood. So there is lots of similarities with mantas and molas, but there are probably more dissimilarities. So it's really, really nice to have these talks back to back, I think. So I'll try and highlight some of the differences as well. So we'll start out with what are sunfish, the habitat and the distribution, and we'll take a global look at this. Some of the touch on the ecosystem roles. Sorry about those some spelling mistakes in here. We'll look at the diets and their predators, some conservation status and threats. And then I want to turn the focus to Bali, which really is quite a special place for sunfish. We'll talk about species, seasonality, cleaner fish interactions, diver behavior, and a little bit citizen science.
Marian, we can't see your presentation.
Oh, you cannot see my presentation?
Yeah.
Well, that is no good. How about now?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now we've been through all of this, I'll just quickly introduce our trust. It's called the Ocean Sunfish Research Trust. It was founded last year. It's based here in New Zealand, where I'm also based. Its prime objective is to engage the public through the use of citizen science. We currently have 2 projects. One is in the United States and the other one is in Bali. And just briefly, I am a marine scientist. My formal training goes back to 1995, but I got my PhD just in 2018. And I'm the co-founder, director, and lead scientist of the trust. All right. Now I'm having a little bit of problems here with my, let's see if this will work. Oh, it'll work, yeah. All right, so we started out with what are ocean sunfish? And of course, they're very famous because they're so huge. So they are the world's heaviest bony fish. So we are not in the rays and the shark realm. We're in the real normal kind of bony fish world. And fish don't normally grow this big because they have a bony skeleton that's quite heavy. And normal fish offset this weight with a swim bladder. And at some stage, that model probably becomes a little bit too heavy and fish don't tend to grow much past a ton, 800 to 1,000 kilos. And we are now in the tuna kind of species. So sunfish are different here. So they can reach 2.3 ton. So quite a lot more than a normal fish, if you will. The max length measured to date is 3.3 meters. And as you can see, it's actually the size of a small car. Now, for many years, people thought there was just one species of sunfish, maybe 2. And it is, of course, the famous Mola-Mola that has been synonymous with sunfish for so long. And it's not that many years ago, back in 2017 and 18, that we did a big revision on the family. And there are now 5 recognized species, and they are in 3 different genera or groups. So this here is the family of ocean sunfishes, and here is the least known perhaps of the sunfishes, called slender sunfish or Renzania laevis, and this sits in a genus by itself. This is an outlier. It's small and it's sippy and it's very different from the other species. So when we get into what people kind of consider the real sunfishes, we're talking about these guys here, 2 different genera and 4 different species. This one here, Masturus lanceolatus, it's called the sharp-tailed sunfish, and it's not very well known either. But you can recognize it quite easily because it has a little extension on its back end here. And then we have the real molars, which I guess you could call the absolute real sunfishes. We've got Mola-Mola, and we've got the giant sunfish Mola alexandrini, and then Mola tecta, or the hoodwinker sunfish that we only formally described back in 2017. So it's quite a more complex world than has been thought of, I guess, until a few years ago. So a lot of what people kind of think about sunfish bats is a mix of all of these different species. If we look at where the sunfish sit in the wider taxonomy of fishes, it sits in here with the porcupine fishes and the puffer fishes and all of these weird file fishes and box fishes and all these really neat, crazy fish that are called the Tetradontioformes. So this one here is quite an outlier again in the wider order here, in that it is so huge. But in essence, it's basically a pufferfish that has taken off from the reef to exploit the life in the open ocean. And in the process, it has just become flattened and huge and lost its tail. Now, another thing about sunfish that's not generally considered is that we might think about that they're huge and enigmatic and they're megafauna, but they're an outlier in the group of megafauna in that their life starts as tiny, tiny, tiny little larvae. So this is where we can really see this. These are normal fish, if you will. They are bony fishes. They lay eggs and they hatch. And in the process of growing up, they increase their size 600 million times from these tiny little larvae to this giant creature here. And that is more than we are aware of any other animal anywhere in the world. So when we consider sunfish and say, what are they and where are they and what do they eat? It's really important to remember we're dealing with a really unusual organism here that starts as a tiny little 1 millimeter egg, hatches to a little larvae, goes through a metamorphosis that includes these crazy forms and spikes and long tails and all sorts. They transform into a juvenile at about 7 centimeters, and they then grow into a larger sunfish. And we think they mature sexually about 1.5 meters long, but that's actually not very well established. It's established for Mola-Mola, but not for the other species. It can then start to reproduce, but then it also, they keep growing, of course, and at some stage they will, if they get to live out their life, they'll become enormously huge. And we don't understand how important is it for these fish to be allowed to live long enough to reach these massive sizes. We don't understand what that means in terms of their reproductive output. Is it okay that one sunfish gets to spawn once and then that's it? Or is it important to keep population levels up, that these fish get to grow to these enormous beings that can obviously pump out a lot of eggs? So this is a bit of an enigma in the sunfish world that we really, really do not understand at all. Now, when it comes to habitat and distribution, we can then already see we need to look at all of these different sizes of sunfish. So the little tiny larvae in pre-juveniles, we don't really know where they are. They're very rarely found, and it is so weird. Why do we not see them more often? They're found in plankton nets sometimes, maybe 50 meters down, maybe 100 meters down, maybe 150 meters down, but really overall they're rare. When sunfish grow to become juveniles, and we're here talking tens of centimeters, they school together, presumably because for safety, and they are coastal. Once they reach a certain size, perhaps around 50 centimeters, again, we're not quite sure, they change habitat, they move offshore, and they become epipelagic. And they become semi-solitary. So you don't find schools of large sunfish. You see them 1 or maybe 2 or 3 at a time. So it seems they might have buddies, but they don't school. So just for the people who are not sure of where the epipelagic is, this is land and this is ocean here. So right in the top 200 meters here is where light penetrates, and that's called the epipelagic. And this is where we find the sunfishes off the coast. but they can dive to over 1,000 meters. So they're well into the mesopelagic. So this is where you will find sunfish. Now, in terms of distribution, we also need to quickly touch on the different species. So Mola-Mola is the world's heaviest, so the largest ones. And you can see here, this is a world map. It's pretty much everywhere. Mola-Mola is the famous one that, and it's also found pretty much everywhere. Mola-Tecta, in turn, we know a little bit better. It's a southern hemisphere species. It's not really found in the northern hemisphere that much. It's a temperate species. Now, Masturus lanceolatus is also a very broad distribution. And so what we are trying to at the moment as the global sunfish research community, we're trying to figure out where the core distribution areas are and what actually segregates these different species from each other. And it looks to be perhaps ocean basins as well as temperature. So this one, for example, the sharp-tailed sunfish loves warm water, whereas Mola-Mola and Mola-Tecta are more temperate species, and Mola-Alexandrini seems to be a subtropical species. But this is an active area of research, and there is so much more to find out. All right, let's touch on the ecosystem role, the diet, and the predators. So again, we have to look at the different life stages of sunfish here, because they climb from being a tiny larvae, they climb the trophic ladders all the way up to being these massive beings. So when they're tiny little larvae, we don't really know very much about them at all. But once they become juveniles, we do know they school, they're coastal, and they have a benthic diet, and it's very broad. And it seems to that they can sort of point their mouth down and squirt water into the seabed and loosen invertebrates in there and eat them. Once they reach that 0.5 meter or so and they start to move off the coast and become epipelagic, their diet changes as well. And it becomes more gelatinous. And so these guys will eat things like jellyfish and siphonophores and salps and so forth. And here is, and again, not a whole lot is known about the actual feeding behavior or anything like this, but someone actually stuck a critter cam on a sunfish and observed how they eat. So they dive down and they find what they want to eat, and they have this mouth that's a bit like a hoover, and they just kind of suck in. And it turns out that they can suck in and out a few times. And even if it looks really primitive, and if it's, you know, they can't really do much with that sort of feeding mechanism, they can actually selectively feed a little bit, so that this one here, this is a jellyfish where it has spat the bell out and just retained the gonads, which is the high energy bit of it. Sunfish have teeth in their throat, pharyngeal teeth, that helps them with feeding. Now, to actually feed, I want to show this graph because it so beautifully illustrates the sunfish life. So we have depth here, and this is time going this way. And when it's black, it's night. And when it's white here, it's daylight. And this is the sunfish with a little tracker on it. And as we can see during the night, it's really close to the surface here at 0 meters. And as daylight breaks, it starts to do these yo-yo dives up and down, all the way until nighttime, and it becomes inactive and it stays shallow again. And that it does that night and day. And when we look at the temperature, we can see that it follows, of course, as it dives steeper, the temperature drops. And so this is pretty much what a sunfish life looks like, yo-yo diving, and it is interspersed with time here at the surface. And this is how you can see them if you are lucky enough to fly in an aircraft and look down and you see a sunfish flat against the surface like that. It's actually thermoregulating. So it's trying to raise the core temperature of its body back up. And when it dives down, it cools down, and then it warms up here at the surface, and it just continues to do that. So that's where the name sunfish has come from, is this sort of basking behavior, the sunbathing behavior of sunfish. There's a new publication out just last year. If anyone wants to read more about the trophic role of sunfish, this is a really good one. It's a colleague of mine from the UK, and they've done absolutely brilliant work in showing how the diet changes with size in sunfish. Now, in terms of who in turn eats the sunfish, when they're small, again, we have to look at all these different life stages of sunfish. When they're small, they're eaten by mainly tuna and billfish and lancet fish, and there's a few different species of fish that'll take them, but these are the kind of fishes that'll take them. So these are quite large. I mean, sometimes we do find little tiny larvae and pre-juveniles in the stomachs of predators, but it's relatively rare actually. But these are sharp-tailed sunfish that was found in the stomach of this yellowfin tuna just a couple of months ago. And when they grow a little bit larger, when they become what I call large juveniles, and we're talking maybe a meter here, they're typically predated upon by sea lions, and even when they're smaller as well, off the coast of California, especially the sea lions take them there. This here is of Chile, the sea lion going for basically I guess the high energy areas of the sunfish. It's in the gut area here. Also blue sharks will take them, and orca as well. It's funny, the orcas seem to train, the moms will teach the kids how to hunt using sunfish. They don't seem to eat them very often, although we really need to do more research here, but they're definitely used as some sort of training model. When sunfish become small adults, so about 1.5 meters, maybe 2 meters, large sharks will take them, and that's white sharks and makos, and orcas will also take them. Here we have, it's very rare that we get to see it, but here we have an observation of Australia up here at Scott Reef, where we actually saw a tiger shark eat a sunfish. When sunfish become very large, like this sort of massive, we really don't know if anyone eats them. There hasn't been any sightings, observations, or reports, not that I'm aware of anyway. Then there's, of course, humans. We eat them too. Well, I shouldn't say we, it's a very specific part of the world in Southeast Asia, Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea. There's a commercial fishery for them there. And basically, the species that are taken there are Mola-Mola, Mola alexandrini, and Masturus lanceolatus, and this is the one with the little extension on its tail here. They're not really taken in the Western world, and I think it's to do with what people prefer to eat, basically. There's artisanal fishery on sunfishes pretty much across the world, as far as we can tell, and including in Indonesia and Lamakara, for example. Here's a sunfish being taken, and at a fish market as well. Sometimes you'll see them, but it's rare. They're not often taken. So what is their conservation status then, when we know so relatively little about them? Well, the current IUCN assessment has Mola-Mola down as vulnerable. And the problem with that is the actual assessment was done, we can now see, was done on a species complex rather than on the single species of Mola-Mola. So the information that went into the assessment was a mix of species. And that is, of course, because it's only recently that we've been able to tell the species apart. So a reevaluation is really needed, and we are doing that. So we are meeting in the global sunfish community. We are meeting nearly weekly doing these assessments at the moment. So some of the main threats there are to sunfish, and this is on a global scale here, is fisheries. So basically that's mainly in Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea. But across the globe, we see sunfish being taken in various fisheries as bycatch. And those are predominantly long lines and trawls and purse seine fisheries. We don't really know what happens to the sunfish once they are put back, whether they survive or not. There is basically no data on this at all. Climate change is, of course, also an issue, as it is for basically every organism on Earth. For sunfishes, we expect there will be range shifts. So species that are like cold water will move south. We don't really know what this is going to mean for their foraging opportunities and so forth. So a bit of a uncertainty there. So let's turn to Bali quickly and look at what we need to be aware of here. So as probably everybody's aware of, but in case there is someone listening in who's not, NUSA PENIDA here between Bali and Lombok is one of the best places in the world to see sunfish seasonally. And so it's very popular to go scuba diving around here. And so when we look at what species we have here, it is the giant sunfish Mola alexandrini we have here, but they are not giants. They are relatively small compared to what they can, what the sizes that they can reach. So remember, this is the species that can reach 2.3 ton. And when we look at how big they are in the NUSA PENIDA area, we gauge they are between 1.2 to 1.8 meters, but there has not been a study done on this. So Janice, if you're out there with your lasers, please go and take some photos for me so we can get some estimates of how big these fish actually are. At the moment, we gauge them by comparing them with divers that are close by. So this kind of size range, we're only talking about 100 to 360, maybe 400 kilos. So they have a long, long way to grow still, these guys. There is another species in the area, and that is this sharp-tailed sunfish that we sometimes see. It's really rare, though, that they are seen by divers. We have over 1,200 photo submissions that we have. I'll talk about this later, but we basically, out of those, we only have 2 of those photo events that were actually sharp-tailed sunfish. So rare to see them by divers, but they are definitely in the area. And they are definitely across the Indonesian archipelago, the species. So when we look at the Bali sunfish, we are talking Mola alexandrini, and we have this phenomenon of the Bali sunfish season, that you see them seasonally. I mean, we can see them year round, but the best chances to see them is sometime between July and August until sometime between August, November, sometimes into December. And that is, of course, the same time as we have the increase in the flow of the Indonesian through flow, and we have cold water upwelling. So just quickly going through, we have each month here, and these colors are sea surface temperature, and each little insert here is Bali and NUSA PENIDA and Lombok. And red is high temperature, blue is low temperature. So when we see January, February, March, April, we basically have warm water capping the surface waters. May, we start to see the upwelling happening and the increase in Indonesian through flow that comes through the Lombok Strait here. In July, this starts to become really pronounced and goes into August, September, October, and then November, December, we start to return into this warm state. So everybody knows that sunfish are associated with this cold water that is, again, associated both with increased flow in the Indonesian through flow and also an increase in upwelling. But what drives the sunfish sightings, the increase in that, we do not understand very well. Is it because sunfish like the cold water and so therefore they are more in this area? Or could it be because they're basically attracted to an increase in primary productivity associated with this increased upwelling? And so the jury is still out on that one. But we do all know that they come into the reefs where the divers are, for the purpose of getting cleaned. So sunfish have an incredible amount of parasites, both on the outside and also on the inside, and they need help to manage this. So it's akin to them going to the dermatologist. They need to go in and get skincare, and they get help by a few different species. The emperor angelfish, of course, is one of the famous ones, and the schooling bannerfish as well. So, and divers love to come and see the spectacle. Unfortunately, there is a tendency to divers being very excited and crowding around the sunfish, and that makes the sunfish freaking out, and they don't really get to enjoy the cleaning services of the cleaning fish. So I guess the million-dollar question is if this is a problem. And that is a very difficult question to answer. Because it really depends on a whole range of things. And one of the core questions is how often each sunfish needs to be cleaned and how often they need to come into the reefs at NUSA PENIDA. And we really don't understand that at all, actually. So if we look carefully at a sunfish, so this is the eye up here, the pectoral fin, we can see it has pattern and things like that. Ectoparasites that are attached to the sunfish skin. So these are a type called monogeneans, which is a little suction cup that sits. And when they attach themselves or grow on the sunfish skin, it seems that the skin becomes all weird. Exactly what it is, I'm not sure, but it's definitely not healthy sunfish skin. And remember, skin, just as our skin is our most important barrier between us and the environment outside, if that's compromised, we are compromised. Exactly the same with sunfish. They depend on a barrier between themselves and the environment to stay healthy. So this is not good. Further, there is a lot of injuries in sunfish. We see them missing big chunks from predators. They can get into propellers and all sorts. And this has, I don't know what has happened. It looks a bit like a propeller scar to me, but I'm not sure. But basically these fish here are coming in to clean, and it's likely that this is an important aspect of healing in these fish. So it's important for them to get this chance to come in. So basically, when we are scuba divers, we need to allow them to come in because we don't know how many other of these cleaning stations there are out there. We don't know how important it is for each sunfish to get this chance. We don't know if they come in every other day or whether they just come in once in a season. We really don't know. And while we don't know, it's important that we don't mess with the system. These fish need this service. So I cannot stress enough, when these fish are in cleaning, divers, we do not disturb them. We really need to leave them alone. And that there's a lot of this kind of keep a 3-meter distance to these fish, which is good. And don't use a flash, but actually a really important thing to keep in mind is to not disturb the cleaner fish. And that is because sunfish don't have normal lateral lines like a normal fish. So they can't actually feel what's going on too much around them. And when they're going to cleaning, they close their eye. They have these membranes that they protect their eyes with. So they depend on the cleaner fish to tell them if there is danger. So if we disturb the cleaner fish, the sunfish will come out of cleaning, they will see the divers, and they will want to leave. So it's important to watch the behavior of the cleaner fish. Stay as far back as you're not interfering with that. And it's also important when they're not in cleaning and you see the sunfish come into the reefs and they're looking for this interaction. Remember, the cleaner fish are reef fish. They don't want to swim off the reef. The sunfish are epipelagic. They don't want to come into the reef. They have to negotiate somehow. Where are they going to do this interaction? The last thing they need is 20 divers to come and interfere with this. So stay back, watch these amazing animals negotiate and get into cleaning, and just stay back and watch them. So keep calm is all I can say. and then stay still. If the sunfish come to you, that's brilliant, and just enjoy being checked out. We don't know, as mantas are very smart, we don't really know anything about sunfish, their cognitive abilities, their behaviors, their signaling to each other. It's a blank sheet, basically, so we don't really know. All right, so I'll finish off here just with a quick note on our citizen science project, which is very much like manta rays. We use skin patterns on sunfish to recognize individuals. So one of the questions we're trying to answer by collecting photos and comparing them with each other is whether we see the same sunfish over and over on the reefs. Now, we have a website, so we're not affiliated with anyone. We're affiliated just with ourselves. So we have our own library of sunfish. It's just from the Bali region. And what we do is exactly like everyone else doing this method. We compare them side by side and we recognize them based on patterns. So if you look very closely, you will see these two are actually the same ones. So if you have sunfish photos, even from years ago, we are still so keen on getting them because these pictures are gold. There's not a lot of them. And every time we get pictures in, we often get multiple submissions of the same fish that has been surrounded by 30 divers, and we get pictures coming in from that same event. So it's uphill to collect these pictures. So anything you have from years back, if you can submit them to us, it will be a huge help. And you can go to this website. There is submission information here. All right. With that, I will finish up. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions, I'll be delighted to try and answer them. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Miriam, for giving us campaigns about the ocean sunfish. Do you have the same hand signal about ocean sunfish like me?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it is like that. And I'm curious, Miriam, about Mola-Mola. Is it really true that Mola-Mola is a crossing animal? Am I right? Because some people say about that.
I'm so sorry, you're cutting out. Could you repeat the question, please?
Oh, okay, I'm so sorry. Yeah, so my question is it really true that Mola-Mola, or I mean ocean sunfish, is a crossing animal between one species and another species? Is it true?
No, so sunfish have evolved just like any other species on Earth. They're quite modern fish, so they have evolved from pufferfishes and have become what they are now. And as far as we know, they are just the 5 species. Whether they can hybridize and basically mate between them or have offsprings between the species, we really don't know at this stage. But they haven't, sunfish, even though they look so alien and weird, they're not a cross between anything. They have evolved by natural selection, just like every other species.
Okay, thank you, Marian, for the answer. I have a lot of questions about Mola-Mola or ocean sunfish, but I checked the question box. There's a lot of questions. So let me check. This is the session you waiting for, guys. So yeah, the first question come from Rick. He asked, I wonder how manta rays communicate with each other. So Dennis, please have time to answer the question.
Okay, thank you for the question. So manta rays communicate with each other. It's actually still a pretty big question, but so far what we know is that they use their cephalic fins, or the fins around their mouth, to communicate, because the cephalic fins, they are very flexible. They can be rolled out. you know, like very like that. They can be streamlined, so it's like very, very streamlined, makes their body very streamlined, so they're easy to move. But sometimes we actually do, according to our colleague Rob's paper, where he studied the social interactions of manta rays, is that their cephalic fins, they move differently. They have different gestures, which might indicate some different meaning. For example, when they are going inside a cleaning station, they would actually slow down and then they would start to unroll their cephalic fins, and maybe that's a sign that they are letting the animals clean their body. And sometimes during mating trains, where the females is in front and the males are at the back following her, we would see the males with their cephalic fins, some of them rolled out, some of them rolled in, and we're not sure what it means. Like maybe they are, there are hypotheses saying that they might sense that she wants to mate. That's why they are following her. But this might not be exactly using the electrical signals of their body, but mostly on olfactory or the sense of smell of these animals. So it's a pretty big question, but mainly it's their gestures of their cephalic fins that tell them what they're going to do and what they want to do so far. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, so Ricky, that's the answer from Janice. I hope it's clear. Is it clear, Ricky?
Thanks, Janice. Thank you, Janice.
Oh, okay. So we move to the next question from Lela Satriani Chandra from Balai ITN Rawa Alpa Watu Mohai. So the question for Miss Janice: if manta rays eat microplastic in the ocean, how bad will it be for manta rays? Is there anything that Marine Megafauna Foundation can do to deal with microplastic in the ocean that are ingested by manta rays? What about microplastic bioremediation with indigenous bacteria? I've heard of their research. So, Janice.
Okay, thank you for the question. So actually we talk about these microplastics and the effects on manta rays in Ellie's, my team leader's papers, and also in my paper. But in general, is that microplastics, unlike larger pieces of plastic where they can clog the digestive system, and so that the animals can't eat, they don't get nutrition. Microplastics are so small that they don't do that. Instead, since they are very, very tiny, they might actually get into the tissues and the cells of these animals. Although we don't have a proper research on that yet, but it is likely that these microplastics, where these plastics they have like a lot of chemical buildups in the plastics, and these chemicals that may be toxins, that may be pollutions, they can spill out of the plastic, and instead these pollutions, these chemicals get absorbed by the animals. So that is a possibility, although currently we don't have any proof on that. It's a research to be done later on. So many research questions right now. But that is one possibility, that, and by these manta rays having these chemicals absorbed in their body, this could also lead to where the mom, when she gives birth, she could pass on these toxins to the baby. And again, as we know, manta rays, they have a slow growth rate and they have a slow population growth. So like anything wrong with the mantas, it's actually pretty terrifying. And is there anything MMF can do to deal with microplastics in the ocean? Again, they're really, really tiny. So even to get the microplastics, you would need a plankton net, which is basically a net where the net is 200 micrometer small. So it's actually like really, really tiny, where you can actually get the microplastics. So it's really hard to get the microplastics what's already in the ocean. But what we can do is everyone can try to prevent plastic usage and using microbeads when we shower or when we wash our face, because that's really the only way to prevent it, is really just by starting from ourselves. And for microplastics with bacteria, there are some research on that, but again, the bacteria getting the microplastics takes a long time, and they need certain conditions to do it. And we just have so much plastics in our oceans right now. I don't think the bacteria getting all the microplastics out would be fast enough. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question.
So for Leila, please kindly confirm, is the answer clear?
Thank you so much. I got it. I hope this research about bioremediation bacteria can overcome about this pollution. But yes, you're right. There's too many microplastics for now. It's maybe just cause the little effect. Thank you so much.
Okay, so moving to another good question from Kezia Sitompul from UNED. So the question for Ms. Janice: how do you know mantas environment only by seeing their photo ID?
Okay, so I think I should explain this a bit more. Because when we take pictures underwater, we take as many pictures as we can, and then we sort it out later on the laptop. Sometimes you can have 100 pictures when there's, or 200 pictures when there's like so many things going on. And by taking a lot of these pictures, sometimes we actually do see glimpses of how the environment is. For example, if the picture is really, really bad, usually that means the water clarity is bad, not really good visibility. But other than that, obviously all research divers would have their dive computer on their hand. And so when we have our dive computers, we just match the data here, for example, the temperature and what we remember into the picture. So for example, if I was diving in Manta Point this morning and the pictures are all clear, I would say that, okay, the environment I remember this morning was clear. It was 23 degrees, for example, and yeah, just those kind of things. So it's not only just from the photo ID, but also from our dive computers and from what we remember when we are diving.
Okay, so Kezia, is it clear? For Kezia, is it clear? We can't hear your voice. Okay, so move to another question. It's for Marianne. So what's your opinion? Is there any information regarding on their growth speed? And then the next question is there any estimation how many larvae they produce and their productivity rate?
Okay, I'll just unmute, maybe that'll help.
Mm-hmm.
So these are great questions, both of them, but take the speed of growth first. The only estimation at present is from aquariums where sunfish have been kept from when they're quite small until they are about 1.5 meters, maybe 2 meters. And in the aquariums, people can measure their size and their weight, and then they can make these growth curves over time. And that is an estimation of the growth speed. And based on those estimations, it's thought that it only takes 20 years from a hatchling of 2 millimeters until the sunfish is 3 meters long. So that is a crazy growth speed. Now, that is in aquariums where they get fed food that they may not be able to hunt themselves. So they get fed things like mussels and squid and fish and stuff. And they don't have to work for this food. So whether this translates to growth speeds in nature is a different question. The only other study we have to we can look towards is sharp-tailed sunfish, so the one with the little extension on the tail. Sunfish haven't got otoliths, so otoliths, you know, like the ear bones that normal fish have, that are used for age estimation, so counting rings, like just like a chronology on a tree, you know, like a tree ring, growth rings. So when you do that on sunfish, you have to use vertebrae. So you take the vertebrae just from behind the skull, which is where the vertebrae are most ossified, because the rest of the skeleton of sunfish is basically like cartilage. So it's useless, but the vertebrae behind the skull can be used. And when people have looked at them, it looks as if it takes 100 years for a sunfish to grow to its maximum size. So those are two very, very big, very different estimates. What the truth is, or what the reality is, we really don't know. Based on the photo identification project that we have, I lean towards the 100 years personally, but I do not at this stage have data to back that up, only indications. So the other question was fecundity, or how many offsprings can a sunfish produce? Again, the science is complex, but we do know that sunfish are crazy fecund. They spawn an incredible number of eggs. So the latest estimate that I have heard is a 2.2 meter long Mola-Mola female. Someone counted 874 million ova in the ovary at any one time. That doesn't mean they are all going to get spawned. A subset may mature and spawn. We really don't understand these processes very well, but there's no doubt these are super fecund fish. That is why it is so strange. Where are the larvae? Where are the small pre-juveniles? Where are they? And why aren't there more sunfish in the world if they are so fecund? So this is something we don't understand, is mortality during this first bit of life. But really good questions.
So Retno, is it answer your question? Okay, we move to the
Yes,
next.
sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'm unable to unmute because the host is
Yeah.
Yes, it's really really clear, but actually I have another question. I'm not sure that the time is enough. So Marianne, if it's possible, maybe I can get the contact of you.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just,
yeah.
At the end of the webinar, we will give you Marianne contact.
I will type it out here. Anyone who wants to get in touch.
Yeah. So okay, while Marianne type her contact, let's move to another question from Aulia. So the question is, do sunfish have any defense mechanism to avoid predator?
We really don't know. So sunfish behavior is something that's really a black box. So most of the research at the moment has been based on dead sunfish. And so what's so special about Bali is that we can actually observe the sunfish and what they do. That is rare that we get to do that. So when we think about larvae from 2 millimeters up to these massive, massive fish, there's probably various strategies along the way of how to avoid the predators that are relevant at each stage of their life. And that will vary from when they're little to they're huge. So this is one thing that is very interesting to me, is if sunfish can learn, what is their cognitive ability because there is no parental care, there's nothing. They spawn, they hatch at 2 millimeters and they're on their own. They have to learn everything based on instincts and then environmental cues and then just learning. So they have a massive journey in front of them, like no other animal on earth. They have to climb up through a size ladder that's unique to them. So this is a really interesting question. I'm afraid I can't answer at all if they have predator avoidance behavior. The only thing we think is that at night they stay at about maybe 50 meters. And sometimes on satellite tracking data, we see them suddenly dive. That may be a predator avoidance behavior, that they have detected an orca or a shark or something, and they're just diving deep to try and avoid the predator. But again, it's speculation.
Yeah. So that's the answer from Marian. So your question is still on research. But that's a good question. Hello, Aul.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Another question from Nurhafiza from UB. Unlike any other bunny fish, why does sunfish have no swimming bladder?
This is again great question. So a sunfish needs to dive up and down in the water column, and we know they can dive as deep as 1,000 meters or more. So as scuba divers, we know when we go up and down in the water and we are only going between surface and maybe 30 meters, we need to pump air in and out of our buoyancy device to make us neutrally buoyant in the water. So you can imagine how cumbersome that must be for a fish to first, dive deep to 300, 400 meters and then up, get all the gas out of the bladder and then get all the gas back in. So that doesn't work. And other fish species that do a lot of vertical migration don't have swim bladders either. So sunfish have come up with a different method. So they have become as light as they can using the bony fish body form. So they have basically gotten rid of most of the skeleton. When you look at a sunfish skeleton, it is massively reduced. There's hardly anything there. The whole back end is gone. They don't have a tail. And instead they have this really light skeleton. And then they have a really thick skin, and we think that has a buoyancy component to it that is light. They also have a very large liver, which, like sharks, that produces a bit of buoyancy. So sunfish are slightly negatively, if they're dead, they will sink, but they are not very heavy. So they're nearly neutrally buoyant in their body form. And this enables them to swim up and down and not worry about gas in and out of a swim bladder.
Okay, so for Nurhafiza, is it clear?
Yeah, thank you for the answer.
Okay, so guys, that's the final question. I know you guys have a lot of questions, but we have a limited time. And once again, thank you, Janice, thank you, Marian, for giving us campaigns about marine megafauna, and you guys are having a deep concern about marine and its life, and I'm so lucky to meet you. I hope one day we can meet in person. Once again, thank you. And that's all. So back to Bram.
Yeah. Thank you, Wanda, Janice, and Marian. Such insightful presentation about those giants. And now I want to announce the door prize winners from the 2 best questions. So here it is. Congratulations for Lela Satriani Chandra from Balai Taman Nasional Rawaupa, and Nurhafiz Sri Albara from UB, Universitas Brawijaya. Please contact us through Instagram direct message at AMD-Bali. Yes, and send us the full name, address, and phone number, also the size of your teeth. I'm afraid our time is up. I believe that all of you have well done through the webinar, and it is my pleasure that you have insightful discussion to, I think, several hours is not enough. I hope that we have learned through the webinar will help us spread awareness about the marine megafauna in the future. So, but before, let's turn on the camera and that we could see, so that you could see all the beautiful face here today. So now is the photo session. Everybody please turn on the camera. So let me. Thank you all. That's could you what is sign for manta actually? This is sunfish, and so like this. Okay, we all post like this. Yes. Okay. 1, 2, and 3. Thank you all. And then for the webinar certificate, please confirm your attendance by fill the form that I will be shared. Okay. And please join us for the next webinars, diving safety, recreational and technical. Tomorrow, also a diving career webinar on the day after, on the Sunday. So I would like to say thank you to all the participants for your positive response on behalf of AquaMarine Diving Bali. I would like to express my appreciation to Janice, Marian, and also Wanda for taking the time for this webinar. And I would like to say thanks to AquaMarine Diving Bali, PADI, ULO, Ocean Sunfish Research Trust, Marine Megafauna Foundation, and our media partners, National Oceanographic, Forum Penyelam Mahasiswa Indonesia, Unit Selam UGM, and also Kelompok Studi Kelautan Biogama. So by this, I officially announce the end of today's webinars. Thank you all. Everybody could fill the form and leave the webinar as soon as finish the form. So have a lovely night in here, or good night for Marianne. Sleep tight and stay safe, everyone. Thank you.